Hi there, it's me, Finn, and tonight we're gonna talk about something odd. Something that actually happened, but we've never really thought about it. Not loud, not frightening, just strange and kind of sleepy. You might be lying in bed right now, laying your head on your pillow, stretching your legs out under the blanket. But in the Middle Ages, well, many people didn't do that. They didn't lie flat. Instead, they slept sitting up, almost like they were propped against a wall or a pillow, with their knees slightly bent. Now, why? Why would they do that? Was it for health? Was it a myth? Was it something they believed? Or just how the beds were made? And what did that feel like, night after night? Tonight, we're going to walk slowly through the quiet world of medieval sleeping habits. No swords, no castles falling, no battles, just how people used to sleep. Let's start by subscribing and settle in. Confuro. So in the dim world of a medieval bedroom, light came mostly from one thing: candles, or oil lamps if you were lucky. The walls were stone, or timber, cold in winter, drafty, often full of sounds, wind sneaking through wooden cracks, the creak of beams above. Even in the towns, it was rarely truly quiet. Dogs barked, horses clopped by, church bells rang softly in the distance. But none of that explains why someone would prop themselves up to sleep. Let's look closer. Beds in the Middle Ages weren't what you're picturing. At least, not all of them. For the wealthy, beds could be huge. Tall four-poster wooden frames, curtains hanging down, carved posts, thick straw mattresses stuffed into linen sacks. Sometimes even feather beds. But those were rare. But for common folks, their beds were often nothing more than simple wooden platforms, or benches with soft woolen covers. Or, if you were really poor, just bundles of hay in the corner, tucked under animal skins. Still, in many cases, the sleeping position was upright. And here's where it gets curious. People would often rest their backs against a slanted headboard or wall. They'd stack pillows, though not the kind you're used to, and use bolsters behind their shoulders. Their legs, not stretched flat, but gently curled, like they were halfway between sitting and lying down. Was it uncomfortable? Maybe. But to them, it was just normal. Why though? Why not just lie down? Well, one idea comes from health. Yep, in those days the body was thought to be made of humors, 4 of them: blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. Too much of one, you'd get sick. And lying flat? It was thought to upset the balance, especially after eating. See, digestion was considered a delicate thing. If you lay down fully, it was believed that the stomach contents would travel up, which sounded dangerous, so they slept propped up. A little like how today, people with acid reflux elevate their heads. Except back then, it was for everything. Another reason, well, they believed in night air. This was the idea that darkness itself carried illness. If you lay flat, your mouth might fall open. You might breathe in more of the bad air. So, sitting up? That was safer. Now, not everyone did this, of course. Some people slept flat. But the practice of upright sleeping was common enough that it showed up in letters, illustrations, and even beds designed for it. Let's think about that bed again. Imagine it, in a small stone house, probably only one room. The bed tucked in the corner, maybe raised on a platform to keep away rats, maybe filled with hay, or moss. You'd climb in, wearing a linen shift, or your clothes if it was cold. Pull a thick woolen blanket over your knees, and then, lean back. Not all the way down, just back. Eyes closed, legs bent, arms folded, or resting in your lap. It would have felt, maybe like dozing in a rocking chair, or falling asleep sitting against a tree. Not cozy by today's standards. But to them, just right. Another layer to this story is how many people shared beds. Yes, even among strangers sometimes. Travelers in inns, servants in noble houses, whole families, sometimes even friends of friends. So imagine 3 or 4 people sitting together in bed, leaning against a headboard or wall, sleeping quietly, maybe snoring, maybe not, the air cold, the candle low, the blanket heavy across everyone's legs. Sleeping upright also allowed for something else, something strange but true: biphasic sleep. What's that? Well, people in the Middle Ages often slept in 2 shifts. The first sleep began not long after sunset. Then, sometime after midnight, they'd wake. Not fully, but enough to sit up, talk, pray, or stir the fire. This period between first and second sleep was considered natural, even helpful. They might write in a journal, or whisper with the person next to them, or just sit in silence for a while before drifting back off. Now imagine doing that from a sitting position. You'd just open your eyes, stretch a little, maybe sip some ale, then relax back against your bolster, and fall into second sleep. But not all the beds were alike. Let's take a quiet walk through a few examples. In a noble house, the master's bed would be grand, curtains around it. Not for decoration, but warmth. You'd step up to it. Yes, up. Because some beds were so high, they needed stools. Inside, woolen sheets, sometimes silk, bolsters stuffed with feathers or horsehair, and the headboard would be angled, slightly, just enough to let you rest upright. Why angled? Because it was built that way. Sleeping upright was built into the design. In a monastery, the beds were simpler. A monk might sleep in a small wooden cell, with a single woolen blanket, and a thin mattress of straw. He'd sleep upright too, perhaps out of tradition, perhaps to resist temptation. Lying flat was considered lazy. Upright, that was more alert, more respectful. Even the idea of being ready to rise and pray, was part of the thinking. Monks would wake many times through the night, to chant, so sitting upright made it easier. Even sick people slept upright. In hospitals or in the home, a person with fever or coughing might be propped up, not just for comfort, but because lying flat was feared. They thought it trapped the sickness inside. So people stayed sitting, because it was better to be half awake than dead. And now here's something truly curious. In old manuscripts and tapestries, people are often shown sleeping with hats on. Not just any hat. Nightcaps, long and pointed, or round and soft. Why? Because heat escaped from the head. That's what they believed. And warmth, was a precious thing. So there you are, sitting up in bed, wrapped in thick wool, wearing a hat, leaning against a wooden wall, legs curled, eyes closed, listening to the creak of the house, the wind outside, maybe a dog barking somewhere far away. And we haven't even spoken yet about dreams. But let's leave that. Instead, think of this. To sleep upright was not strange to them. It was safe, sacred, ordinary. The way their beds were made. The way their bodies felt best. And maybe even, the way we might sleep again someday. If the world got cold enough. You may be lying flat now, but close your eyes. Imagine leaning back, just a little. Feel your breath slow. Feel the blanket over your knees, and the soft weight of night pressing in. And so the night continues. But there's more to this story still. Like how they dealt with bugs, or who shared a bed with whom, or what happened if you couldn't sleep. The candle flickers. You're still leaning back, legs tucked in. It's quiet. Not just in the room, but in the world. But in the Middle Ages, nighttime wasn't always peaceful. In fact, one of the biggest reasons people slept sitting up had little to do with health, or beds, or monks. It had to do with pests. And I don't mean just little bugs, though those were plenty. Let's go back into that room again. Straw mattress, wooden frame, cold air, the kind of air that smells a little like smoke, and wool, and earth. The room is dark. Maybe there's one window, maybe none. You're wrapped up in cloth, but the air touches your face. And just outside the edge of your vision, something might be crawling. Bedbugs, lice, fleas, rats. Sleeping on the floor, not a great idea. Lying flat, with nothing to cover your face. Even worse, some slept upright so they could stay alert. If you heard a rustle, or a scratching noise, you could tilt your head up, look around, swat something away. Sitting gave them control. They didn't have bug spray, or clean sheets. Washing bedding was a task done only a few times per year for most. So propping yourself upright, that was just practical. And not just for bugs. There were people too. Drunkards, thieves, fires. If you were sleeping near a door, or in a crowded house, or an inn with strangers nearby, being able to open your eyes and sit up quickly was a quiet kind of safety. Let's visit one of those inns. It's the 1300s. You're traveling on horseback. It's late autumn. Wind is blowing outside. And it carries that sharp scent of wet leaves and firewood. You pull into a small stone inn off the main road. The sign is swinging in the wind. Inside. There's warmth. A fire burning. 2 or 3 others already here. They've eaten, drunk ale, maybe played dice. But there are only 2 beds. You're told to double up. That's just the way. Stranger or not, you share the space. You lie back, but not flat. You sit upright, your head resting against the wall, cloak pulled up over your chest. The other traveler does the same. You both sit, knees slightly bent, eyes closed. No one lies down fully. Not here. It's just the way people did it. And there's something else. Superstition. In medieval thought, lying flat too long looked, well, too much like death. Dead bodies were laid flat, rigid, arms down at the sides, eyes closed. So to lie that way in life. It made some people uneasy, especially in homes where loved ones had died. So they sat, to show they were living, to show they would rise again in the morning. Now let's step into a different house. A village cottage. The fire is low. The walls are made of daub and wattle, mud and sticks and straw. It smells like cooking, and dampness, and sheep wool. Inside, a mother sits propped in bed. Her husband has already drifted off. 2 children lie sideways at the foot of the bed, and she half upright, arms around her knees, stares into the glowing ash. Not quite asleep. Not quite awake. This was the most human part of sleep in those times. They didn't always fall into sleep the way we do. They drifted. They hovered. They watched the dark. And maybe we should pause here, not in the story but in the scene. Because sleeping upright, it meant you could listen, to the rain, to mice, to footsteps. It meant you could keep dreaming, but still know where you were. Just enough awareness to stir when the world stirred. And for many, that was comforting. Now, let's gently return to the world of pillows. Pillows. You may think of something soft, fluffy, white. But in the Middle Ages, pillows were, well, something else. For the poor, you might have no pillow at all. Just a folded cloth, or your arm. For the middle class, maybe a pillow of linen, stuffed with straw, or horsehair, or old rags. Something heavy, firm. The wealthy, they had bolsters, long, round pillows, sometimes wrapped in fine cloth, stuffed with feathers. They were expensive, but perfect for sitting up. You'd rest your back against one, maybe another under your knees, maybe one behind your neck. You'd shift, until it felt just right. Not too far up, not too flat. Even the shape of pillows supported this upright sleeping habit. They were meant to support the body sitting, not just the head lying down. We could even wander into the royal chambers now. Imagine a queen's bed, enormous, canopy overhead, gold thread woven into the hangings, fresh rushes scattered on the floor. She's tucked into layers of silk and fur, upright, a servant nearby, a dog curled at the foot of the bed. She holds a small book, maybe of prayers, maybe poems. Her back rests against a carved wooden headboard. Her eyes flutter closed, upright, peaceful. This wasn't just habit. It was dignity. Lying down fully sprawled was unseemly. Sitting upright, that was composed. And this idea extended even into sickness. Let's say someone had a fever, or a cough, or the plague. Doctors, if you could afford one, would tell you prop them up. Let them breathe. Let the air flow. Keep the blood from rushing to the head. So people lay sick in chairs, or in beds with so many pillows, they almost looked like they were sitting in a throne. Not because it cured them, but because that's what felt right. And even in death. A curious thing, some noble people were buried in tombs with carvings showing them not lying flat, but slightly inclined. As if even in death, they remained alert, ready, a little closer to heaven. Now, let's gently shift to another question. What happened when the night was cold? And it was often cold. Winters in England, France, Germany. They were harsh. Stone houses held on to chill. Fireplaces didn't always warm a whole room. So, what did people do? They huddled, they shared, and sitting up made it easier to curl close to others. Knees to knees, back to back. Some even built bed benches, narrow wooden frames that allowed several people to sit side by side, under one blanket facing forward. It almost looked like a pew in a church, but it was a bed. Imagine that. 3 or 4 sleepy bodies, leaning together. No one fully reclined. The youngest in the middle, the oldest on the ends. Breathing softly, not quite lying, not quite awake. Wrapped in wool, listening to the quiet pop of the hearth. This was a kind of closeness we don't often know anymore. A sleep not about softness, but survival. A position not about comfort, but safety. A posture not about dreams, but dignity. So if you think it was strange, maybe it wasn't. Maybe sleeping upright was the most natural thing in the world once. You're still with me? Then maybe you've noticed. Your own breathing has slowed. Your blanket has grown heavier. Your eyelids may be a little lower. And yet, the story keeps unfolding. Because next we'll wander softly into a deeper part of sleep. What happened between the two sleeps? And what did they do when they woke up in the dark? Back into the quiet of the Middle Ages. The fire's still smoldering. Just a glow now. You can almost hear it crackling in the dark. Your head is still upright, resting, calm. Because tonight, we're slipping into a part of the night that almost no one talks about anymore. People didn't sleep like we do today. Not in one long stretch. Nope. They had something different, something called segmented sleep. Two separate sleeps, with a gentle wakefulness in between. And that middle part, that's where it gets interesting. Let's go back in, slowly, softly. The night is long, longer than most of us can imagine. In winter, especially in Northern Europe, darkness would stretch from late afternoon to well after sunrise. That's nearly 14 or even 15 hours of night. People couldn't sleep all the way through. Their bodies didn't even try. So what did they do? Well, around nightfall, they'd lie down, or rather sit up in bed, and drift into their first sleep. It lasted a few hours. Deep, heavy, restorative. Then, somewhere around midnight, their eyes would open. Not in fear, not in confusion, but peacefully. They were awake, but still resting. Imagine it. You're a baker's apprentice. You've had a long day, kneading dough, tending the oven, selling loaves. Your body aches. You sleep early, in your small cot tucked beside the kitchen hearth. The first sleep takes you quickly. And then, hours later, your eyes open. The coals are still warm. The wind whistles softly outside. And you don't panic. Because this is normal. It's your waking hour. People used this time for so many quiet things. Some prayed, softly, whispering toward the ceiling. Some made love. It was even thought to be the best time for conceiving children, because your body was rested and your mind was still. Others wrote, read, tended to a small chore, stirred the fire, watched the stars. Monks, of course, had strict hours for this. The night office, called matins, was a scheduled waking. Bells rang in monasteries. Robes rustled, lamps flickered, and together they chanted, in the darkness. But common people, they just rose within their own rhythm. No rush, no lights, just you and the night. This quiet wakefulness had a name too, the watching hour. A time for reflection, or small tasks, or maybe, just lying quietly. Some people would sit up in bed, breathe, gently rub their legs or arms, think about their dreams, or talk to whoever shared the bed. Yes, this was a time when talking happened. Not big loud chatter, but soft murmuring voices. Maybe about the day that passed. Maybe about what tomorrow would bring. Imagine a father and mother, sitting together, whispering about the harvest, or their children, or just watching the candle burn down. This little break between two sleeps. It was like a second evening, tucked into the middle of the night. And it didn't feel strange. In fact, early physicians believed this pattern was healthy, natural. They even had words for it. First sleep, second sleep, and the interval in between. Let's step softly into a medieval town. It's nearly midnight. The moon is high. The streets are quiet. But behind closed shutters, not everyone is asleep. In one cottage, a seamstress sits upright in her straw bed, stitching slowly by candlelight. Her husband, next to her, softly hums an old hymn. In another home, a boy stirs the fire, adds a log, warms his hands. In the next, a widow whispers a prayer, then closes her eyes again. It's not insomnia, it's just the shape of the night. And there's something else. Something very human about this middle hour. Because it was a moment where people weren't trying to escape the dark. They were inside it, waking softly, thinking calmly, letting the quiet surround them like a blanket. We forget now, but nights used to feel longer, deeper, and people lived within them, not just through them. They weren't afraid of being awake. They didn't reach for their phones. They didn't rush back to sleep. They just were. So maybe you can see now. Why people slept sitting up. It let them shift more easily during this time. They didn't have to toss and turn. They just leaned forward, lit a candle, took a sip of water, whispered to someone, then leaned back again. Sleeping upright made this transition smooth, gentle. And if you were lucky, this midnight moment wasn't lonely. You'd hear others across the room, or through the wall, moving too. Maybe a sneeze, a cough, a soft yawn. Everyone was part of it. The whole world awake in the middle of the night, for just a little while. And then, just as softly as they'd awakened, they drifted into their second sleep. This second sleep was lighter, more dream-filled, more open to the mind's wandering. It wasn't as deep, but it felt longer. Because dreams stretched and curled like smoke. A farmer might dream of rivers that flowed uphill. A child might dream of lambs talking softly in the dark. A washerwoman might dream of rain that cleaned everything it touched. And when the sun began to rise, slowly, gently, gold against the mist, they'd open their eyes, not startled, not tired, just done, finished with the night. We've lost this rhythm now, the rhythm of the dark. But once it was everywhere. People expected to wake at midnight, expected to sit upright for a bit, expected to listen before dreaming again. And here's something curious. Even doctors centuries later still talked about this. In the 17th and 18th centuries, people would write in their diaries about first sleep and second sleep. They didn't think it was odd, just normal. Letters mention it. Poems hint at it. Even Benjamin Franklin wrote about it in passing. So why did we stop? Electric light, maybe. Longer workdays, shorter nights. Modern beds that pulled us flat and quiet for 8 full hours. We forced the night into one long block. But maybe that old rhythm isn't gone completely. Maybe you've woken in the middle of the night before, looked around, stared at the ceiling. Maybe you thought something was wrong. But now maybe you see. You were just echoing something very old. Something medieval. Block. We're still in that room, aren't we? The fire's nearly out. The candle's a stub. You're leaning back, but your head is still a little upright. You can hear your own breathing. Soft, warm. And you wonder, what would it feel like to rise at midnight, light a tiny flame, and just be? No phone, no alarm, no pressure. Just you. The dark, the night. A little break between dreams. That's what the Middle Ages knew. That sleep wasn't one long race. It was a rhythm, a conversation, a song with 2 verses. And now, maybe you're drifting into your own second sleep. But we're not quite done yet. Because next time, we'll step into the beds themselves. How they were built, what they were made of, who got to sleep in them, and who didn't. But for now, close your eyes, lean back, or sit up, just like they did. Absolutely, the fire's still warm, and the shadows haven't moved far. In the last part, we drifted through the silence of segmented sleep. That quiet hour between first and second slumber. The way people watched the dark, not fearing it, just living inside it. But now it's time to open our eyes to something a little more material. Tonight, we're going to sit by the bed, or should I say, climb up into it. Because medieval beds weren't quite what we imagine. They weren't soft, or wide, or private. And sometimes they weren't even beds. So, let's slip back in time, softly now, into the very heart of the medieval home. The bed. Here we are. A tiny cottage. A fire flickering low. A shutter creaks gently in the wind. In one corner you'll see it. The bed. But not like yours. It's short. Raised. Built from heavy wood. Oak or beech, often darkened by smoke. You walk closer, and you see the ropes. Yes, ropes. Crossing under the mattress frame. Woven tight like a big square net. This is what holds the bedding up. No springs. No box frames. Just ropes. And that's where we get the old phrase, sleep tight. Because every so often they had to re-tighten the ropes. Otherwise the whole bed sagged like a hammock. Now look at what's on top of it. That mattress? Not fluffy. Not soft. It's likely a big lumpy bag filled with straw. Sometimes wool. Sometimes feathers. If you were wealthy. But for most, straw was the common choice. Can you smell it? A little dusty. A little earthy. But clean. They'd change the stuffing from time to time. Some even mixed herbs into it. Lavender, rosemary, mint, to keep insects away, and to help them sleep. And the pillows? Well, not everyone had one. Some used rolled cloths. Some used a folded cloak. A true pillow, stuffed and stitched, was more of a luxury. Even more so, the sheets. Sheets weren't cheap. Not back then. They were hand-woven, bleached in the sun, carefully stored. Only the wealthiest homes had soft linen sheets that could be changed regularly. Poorer families used heavy wool blankets, rough and scratchy, sometimes made from repurposed clothing. And the blankets were heavy, very heavy, not just for warmth, but also because homes were cold. Stone walls, dirt floors, thin shutters, no insulation. Imagine sleeping in December. No fire, just heavy cloths stacked high on your body. They'd even sleep in their clothes. And sometimes, they'd share the bed. Yes, shared. Often. Let's talk about that. Beds were shared by necessity. Whole families in one bed. Sometimes even guests. Or servants. A husband and wife. 2 or 3 children. Maybe a grandmother on the edge. They slept close for warmth. For safety. And because there wasn't space anywhere else. In inns, you might find yourself sleeping beside a complete stranger. No one found it unusual. It was just part of the night. But what about the rich? Let's tiptoe upstairs, into the manor house. Here, the bed is tall, very tall. So tall you need a step stool to climb in. The frame is carved, heavy, covered in symbols or vines. And rising from each corner, great wooden posts, holding up a canopy. Curtains fall down on all sides, drawn shut at night. Why? Warmth, mostly, but also privacy. In a world without real bedrooms, bed curtains were like walls. They created a small dark space where no one could see in. These canopy beds were called tester beds. And they were prized, even passed down through generations. And here's something else. The bed wasn't just for sleeping. It was also for receiving guests. Yes. In noble houses, the lord might receive close visitors in his bedchamber. While still in bed, it wasn't considered lazy or strange. The bed was the center of comfort, warmth, even business. Now look at the headboard. It's short, sometimes angled. And the sleepers? They're sitting upright, propped with bolsters or boards. Why? Remember, people believed lying flat was dangerous. You could choke. You could let the bad air settle in your chest. Better to stay raised, elevated. It also made it easier to wake in the middle of the night, during that segmented sleep. So the bed was almost like a seat, a shared seat, a raised platform, a warm island in a cold house. Let's listen for a moment. A dog sighs in the corner. A baby murmurs under the blankets. Outside, an owl calls once, twice. And the bed creaks. Not because it's unstable, but because it's alive. It's holding people, protecting them from the cold floor, keeping them close together. It's not a perfect place, but it's a place of peace. And there's something else. Bed chambers weren't always private. In fact, the word chamber just meant room. And if you were a servant or traveler, you probably slept in the hall, a wide open space near the hearth. You'd roll out a mat, or sleep on a bench, or even on a pile of straw. In monasteries, monks slept in long shared dormitories. No beds, just wooden planks and small cloths. Silence ruled, no talking, no noise. In cities, apprentices often slept under shop counters. Laborers used haylofts. Some didn't have a bed at all. But still, they found sleep, even sitting upright, even cold, even surrounded by noise. Because the body will always search for stillness. And back then people knew. Stillness wasn't found in luxury. It was found in ritual. Beds weren't just objects. They were stories, passed down from father to son, given as wedding gifts, etched with names, carved with faith. Some even believed that evil spirits could hide in the bed, so they'd hang charms, crosses, even horseshoes near the headboard. In Scotland, people used to whisper a small prayer before lying down. God be at my head, and at my feet, and at my left, and at my right. Imagine saying that every night, like wrapping yourself in a soft thought. We don't always think about our beds today. We fall into them, scroll phones, sleep flat, alone. But long ago, sleep was a shared journey. The bed was a boat, and each night it carried a small crew across the sea of darkness. Maybe tonight, you'll think a little more about the way you sleep, about your pillow, the shape of your blanket, the way you turn, and maybe you'll sit up for a while, feel the silence. Let it wrap around you, just like those heavy wool covers once did. Next, we'll explore what happened outside the bed. What noises crept in at night. What dangers stirred. What comfort things people kept near. Candles, charms, cats. But for now, breathe in, sit up, and let yourself drift. Sleep gently. We're still here, still sitting up, right where we left off. The fire's dimmed now. The shutters creak just once, and settle. Outside, the night has deepened. We've talked about sleep, beds, and the strange way people once settled into the dark. But tonight, let's talk about what didn't sleep. Because in the Middle Ages, the night never truly rested. So tonight we're going to listen to the sounds of medieval night, to the shadows outside the shutters, to the things that walked when others lay still. Don't move too much. Let's just listen. The first thing you'd hear, if you were lucky, was nothing. Just the wind brushing against thatch, the tiny rustle of straw shifting under a blanket, maybe a fire popping in the hearth. But most nights, silence wasn't common. Not in villages, not in towns, not even in castles. There was always something awake. Outside, beyond the wooden door, you'd hear the animals, cows in their pens, shifting, chickens fussing in their roost, a goat stomping a hoof now and then. And dogs. Dogs weren't pets, really. They were guards, kept outside, chained sometimes, and they barked, a lot. Sometimes at foxes, sometimes at people, sometimes at nothing. A sudden bark in the middle of the night could stir the whole house, especially when the night was so deep, so still, that even the creak of a rope bed sounded loud. Now listen closer. There's movement, soft footsteps. Is it a person? Is it a thief? No, it's likely just a cat. Cats were cherished in some homes, kept for mice. They wandered freely, even at night, quiet as the wind. If you had a cat in the room, you might feel its weight on your legs, its purr in the silence, its warmth on the coldest night. But not every sound was comforting. Sometimes, you'd hear voices. Yes, at night. You might not believe it, but people often woke up in the middle of the night, talked, whispered prayers, told dreams, even sang. Sometimes they would rise, tend the fire, drink a little ale or wine, then go back to sleep. Some believed that the dead walked at this hour. The quiet between first and second sleep was sacred and strange. So, a whispered chant in the dark wasn't unusual. Or a door opening, a floorboard shifting, a cough from the neighbor's cottage. Because everything carried, especially in towns. Let's walk through one now, just softly, just listening. A medieval town at night is never silent. Water trickles from the public fountain. A drunk stumbles home, mumbling. A donkey brays in a nearby stall. If you lived near an inn, the sound of laughter, sometimes weeping, might drift in through your walls. People stayed up drinking, arguing, even playing music. Not everyone had the luxury of rest. In monasteries, monks would wake for prayer multiple times during the night. Matins, lauds, vigils. The bell rang to summon them. A low, slow tone that drifted through the air. You could hear it for miles. It reminded the people that even in darkness, someone was awake. Someone was praying. It was comforting and strange. Like the night had its own rhythm. And now we should talk about what happened when something went wrong. A fire, for example. Fires were constant dangers. Roofs were thatched. Floors were straw. One stray spark, and the whole house could catch. So if you heard someone shouting fire in the night, you'd jump from your bed. Buckets, water, yelling. It was chaotic, but it was life. Or, worse. You might hear hooves, heavy, fast, the sound of riders, knights maybe, or tax collectors, or soldiers. Sometimes they came in peace, sometimes not. Let's not go there just yet. Not all sounds were danger. Let's go back inside. Think of what you'd keep by the bed. A small candle maybe, if you were lucky. A stub of wax, a flint, or a tiny lantern. But people didn't light candles freely at night. Wax was expensive, so most kept things dark. Still, they knew their homes, knew the path to the chamber pot, knew where the beams were. Children stirred in the dark, whispering. Adults listened, always half awake. People didn't expect perfect sleep. They expected to wake. That was normal. Sometimes, you'd hear the weather. Thunder shaking the roof. Rain tapping on wooden boards. The howling wind whistling through the shutters. And sometimes, snow. Snow made everything quiet. Thick, muffled. You could almost hear the silence it brought. Now, imagine this. You're sleeping. Upright, slightly, covered in heavy cloth. You wake in the middle of the night. Not startled, just aware. And there's a sound. Hoofbeats. Far away. You wait. Nothing else. Maybe it's a merchant arriving late. Maybe it's a dream. You turn slightly. The bed creaks. A child breathes beside you. Then, back to sleep. And when you wake again, the sun is rising. A rooster crows. Bread is baking. The fire is crackling again. And the sounds of the night are gone. But they were real. The medieval night was not empty. It was filled with the ordinary, and the unknown. The living, and the half asleep. The wind, and the whispers. And always, that soft thread of time pulling people through the darkness. Hour by hour. Not rushing, just flowing. A little like this story. We've only just begun to see the medieval night for what it really was. A world within a world. Next time, we'll stay awake just a little longer. We'll wander further, into the rituals of the night. The prayers, the fears, the things people believed might come, if they didn't sleep right. But for now, close your eyes, and listen. The night is still talking. Sleep well. Ah, you're back. Still with me. The fire's just warm enough to keep the chill away. The candle stub is almost gone, but not quite. And the night, still here, still deep. In the last story, we listened to the sounds of the medieval night. Tonight we'll talk about what people believed was hiding in that darkness. Because while bodies sat up in bed to sleep, minds wandered through something stranger. So tonight, let's drift slowly into the world of medieval nighttime beliefs. A world of saints, spirits, dreams, and warnings. Let's start soft, and let the darkness guide us. Here we go. In the Middle Ages, the night wasn't just dark. It was holy, and dangerous, and full of meaning. To sleep at night wasn't just a break from the day. It was a ritual, a surrender. People didn't fall asleep by accident. They prepared for it, carefully. It often began with a prayer. Even the poorest peasant, lying in a smoky room, might whisper, "Now I lay me down to sleep," or something much older, maybe a Latin blessing they couldn't quite translate. But they knew it kept the demons away. Because yes, there were demons. People believed that when you closed your eyes, you opened a door to dreams, to angels, to evil things too. That's why they often crossed themselves before sleeping, or tied a piece of blessed thread to the bed frame, or placed a tiny bone of a saint under the pillow. Yep, even bones. Let's walk to a medieval house now. Not too big, not too small. The family is sitting on their straw-stuffed bed, just after dusk. They've eaten, prayed, maybe even sung a hymn. They reach for a protective charm. Some used a piece of iron, others, a carved wooden token. Some had tiny crosses made of wax or ash. They weren't decorations, they were shields. Because the night, oh the night, was when spirits moved freely, and sleep made people vulnerable. Have you heard of the mare? Not the horse. No, not at all. The mare was a creature believed to sit on your chest while you slept. It made it hard to breathe. It gave you dark dreams. It didn't leave marks, but it felt real. They say it caused nightmares. That's actually where the word comes from. People feared it. Some placed sharp objects under their beds to ward it off. Others slept with a knife nearby, just in case. Even a Bible under the pillow could help, especially one written in Latin. But the mare wasn't alone. There were will-o'-the-wisps too, glowing lights in the distance, flickering, floating, and sometimes leading travelers off the path. People believed they were souls, trapped between worlds. Others whispered about witches. Witches were said to travel by night, of course. They were blamed for sudden illness, bad dreams, missing animals, and for sleep that wouldn't come. Let's pause. Not all nighttime beliefs were scary. Some were beautiful, like the belief that your soul left your body as you slept. Not forever, just for a while. It wandered, drifted, learned things. That's why dreams mattered. People believed dreams came from God, or the devil, or even the dead. A strange dream could be a message. So, when someone woke suddenly in the night, they didn't always just roll over. They sat up, reflected, and sometimes even wrote it down. Well, if they could write. Let's talk about the first and second sleep again. Yes, we're returning to it. Because it wasn't just a physical habit. It was spiritual. People believed that time between the two sleeps, usually sometime after midnight, was special. It was called the watch. And during the watch, the world was quieter, softer, and closer to the divine. Many monks and nuns scheduled their vigils at this time. But even common folk, they sometimes rose. They might tend to a sick child, check on a cow, or simply sit in silence. Maybe you'd rise, light a little candle, pour yourself some warm wine, and listen, to the house, to the sky. and maybe whisper a second prayer, just to be safe. Now let's talk about dream books. Yes, medieval people had books that explained dreams. If you dreamed of flying, that could mean spiritual elevation, unless it meant temptation. Dreamed of teeth falling out, could be death. Or just bad cheese. Yep, they were confusing. But people used them anyway. They'd ask others too. A neighbor, a priest, even a wise woman outside the village. Dreams weren't nonsense. They were messages, and people took them seriously. Of course, not all beliefs were shared by everyone. In Italy, the night was different than in Norway. In a castle you had guards. In a village you had trust, or luck. But one thing stayed the same. People never truly felt alone at night. The air was thick with things unseen. Let's go outside now, slowly. Step over the threshold. Feel the cool earth underfoot. Look up, the stars. Medieval people saw meaning in the stars. The sky was a map. The moon, a clock. The constellations, signs. Sometimes people believed that certain stars brought bad luck. Others watched the sky to predict illness or crop failure. But mostly, the stars just watched back. Let's sit here for a while, under the stars. Let's imagine what it felt like. No electricity, no phones, just you, and the darkness, and your thoughts. You hear an owl, a far-off howl, and the slow creak of trees moving in the breeze. You say one last prayer, and go back inside. You sit upright, because you always do, and you close your eyes. You don't fall asleep. You drift into something else. A dream, a memory, a journey, and maybe, if you believe what they believed, you're not sleeping alone. We've explored the beliefs of the night, the good, the strange, the shadowy. Next we'll move into the dreams themselves. Not just what they meant, but what they felt like, what people remembered when they woke, and how dreams shaped life in the daylight. But for now, let your own thoughts drift like candle smoke, soft, warm, rising, and vanish. Sleep, slowly. Sleep, safely. Alright, here we are again. Still night, still quiet, still drifting. The fire's just aglow now. The air, cool, but not cold. And your eyes, maybe a little heavier. Good. Tonight, we go deeper. Because now we're not just thinking about dreams, we're dreaming with them. In the Middle Ages, people didn't just sleep to rest, they slept to see. And what they saw? Well, some of it was beautiful, some of it strange, and some of it felt more real than being awake. So tonight, we're opening the dream door. Step softly. Imagine this. You're a farmer in a quiet English village. You've worked all day, prayed before bed, and fallen into your first sleep. Now sometime after midnight, you've woken gently. You sit upright, like most folks do, and look around your little wooden house. There's no noise, just the soft hum of night insects, and the warm breath of your sleeping wife nearby. But then, you feel something, a presence, and when you close your eyes again, the dream begins. For medieval people, dreams weren't just images, they were messages, or warnings, or answers to questions they didn't know they were asking. And, sometimes, they were visions of things yet to come. People often dreamed of dead relatives, a mother standing by the fire, a grandfather walking through the village again. They didn't scream, they didn't float, they simply were. And the dreamer, they'd sit quietly in their dream, and listen. Maybe the relative gave advice, or shared a secret, or asked for a prayer. That was common. You see, in medieval belief, the dead still needed things. Prayers, candles lit in their name, a word said at mass. So if you dreamed of someone who had passed, you paid attention. You might tell a priest, or leave a little bread at the altar, just to be sure, just to be safe. And then there were the animal dreams. Ah yes, dreams of deer running across fields, of wolves staring with golden eyes, of birds flying higher than they should. Animals had meanings. A snake might mean betrayal. A dog could mean loyalty, or death. Dream books. They tried to explain it all. But people often just felt the meaning too. Like when you wake up, heart racing, and somehow know something's changed. There were also dreams of falling. Oh yes, falling down a well, off a mountain, even through the sky. Some believed that meant you were losing grace. Others thought it was the soul returning suddenly to the body. And the feeling? Sharp, fast, then, gone. And you'd wake up, blink, sit upright, maybe whisper a prayer, just in case. Then there were dreams about heaven, a bright city, endless gardens, music that didn't sound like music at all. Some said they heard bells, others, the voices of angels. These dreams felt warm, slow, safe, and people remembered them their whole lives. Sometimes they'd tell a local monk or scribe, and it would be written down. A few of those dream stories still survive. Imagine that. A single night's dream, lasting 1,000 years. But not all dreams were peaceful. There were dreams of hell too. Oh, not fire and demons exactly. Not always. Sometimes it was just a feeling of being trapped, or wandering forever through a dark forest, or standing in a church that slowly filled with water. Those dreams made people wake suddenly, sit up, sweating. And again, they'd pray. A short one, a long one. Sometimes just a whispered, "Lord, protect me." Let's step into another dream now. This one belonged to a woman in France. She dreamed she was in her garden, in summer, but every flower she touched turned to frost. She wandered, her fingers trembling, and then she saw a deer with golden antlers. It bowed its head, and then she woke. She told her husband. He told a friar. The friar said the flowers were her regrets, the frost, her silence, and the deer, maybe a sign of the Virgin Mary. Strange, isn't it? But in the Middle Ages, dreams mattered, more than you think. Even kings and queens took dreams seriously. There are records of rulers who delayed battles, just because of a dream. One king dreamed his horse refused to move. He canceled his journey the next day. The road had collapsed during the night. Coincidence? Maybe. But to medieval minds, dreams were often wiser than reason. Let's sit down now, just us. In an old wooden room. Fire flickering, slowly. And let's listen to the dream of a young monk from Germany. He dreamed that the entire world was made of glass. Every hill, every bird, even the wind. And when he walked, he left no footprints. He said it felt peaceful, like floating. When he woke, he wept softly. Not from fear, but from something else. Maybe you've had a dream like that too. One that felt too big to explain. Some people even trained themselves to dream better. They avoided certain foods before bed, prayed in special ways, or slept with relics nearby. Others believed dreams came easier during storms, or under a full moon. Still others thought if you slept near certain plants, like lavender or rosemary, your dreams would be clearer, sweeter, more meaningful. Let's step away from the beliefs for a moment. Let's just float, like a dream would. Imagine lying in a medieval bed, straw beneath you, a cat curled near your feet, the fire low, the stars outside the wooden shutters. You close your eyes, and the dream comes. It's soft, warm, endless. You're standing by a river made of light. You see someone far away, waving, but you're not afraid. You smile, you understand, even if you don't. And when you wake, you keep the dream close, like a smooth stone in your pocket. You don't tell anyone, or maybe you tell everyone, because sometimes, a dream is just a dream, but sometimes, it's a story waiting to be lived. And that's where we'll leave it tonight. Still dreaming, still floating. In the next part, we'll step back into the waking world. We'll see how the second half of sleep began, what people did after their first dreams, how they prepared for the last part of the night, and how morning slowly returned. But for now, let your breath slow, let your thoughts soften, and if a dream comes, follow it, softly, silently. See you there. Of course, let's drift a little further. You're still with me? Good, because now, something begins to stir, not loud, not fast, but slow, like a gentle pull from the edge of sleep. Tonight, we continue where the dream left off, where our medieval sleeper sat up quietly in bed, eyes adjusting to the pale glow of the hearth. This was not a time of confusion or panic. This was normal. They had woken from their first sleep. Now, we move into the mysterious middle of the night, a time historians once called the watch, and for the people back then, it was almost sacred. You see, between first and second sleep, there was a kind of peace. The village was still. The birds were quiet. Even the dogs curled tight in the hay, barely moved. But inside the homes, a soft stirring, because people were awake. The idea of two separate sleeps may sound strange now, but to them it was as natural as the sunrise. After several hours of rest, they would rise, sit up, stretch their limbs quietly in the darkness, and begin their wakeful hour. They didn't rush. They didn't worry. They simply existed, in a soft, sleepy, thoughtful state, a place between dreams and duties. Some used this time to pray, not loudly, not urgently, but slowly, with whispered words in candlelight. The book of hours was sometimes opened, fingers tracing the lines, mouths moving in rhythm with the quiet tick of embers cracking. This wasn't obligation. This was communion, a soft, private connection in the quietest hours of the night. Others used this time to think, to ponder, to reflect on the day that had passed, or the day to come. They may have looked out through tiny wooden shutters, watching the stars, guessing the hour from their position, or simply listening. Listening to the wind, to their own breath, to the creaks of timber in their roof. It wasn't empty silence. It was full. Some even wrote things down. That may sound odd, but among monks, scribes, and educated nobles, this in-between time was often used for quiet writing, letters, poems, thoughts scribbled in the margins of books. You can still find them today. Little midnight notes written by candlelight. One monk wrote, "I write this while the world sleeps. The night holds the truth better than the sun." Beautiful, isn't it? But not everyone spent this time alone. This was also the hour for intimacy. Yes, for couples, this gentle moment between sleeps was often the time for closeness. It was unhurried, unpressured. There were no children awake, no duties calling, just the fire, the quiet, and time to connect. Doctors from the medieval period even recommended it, saying the body was more relaxed during this period, more attuned. But let's step back to a small farmhouse now. The parents sit on the edge of their straw mattress. One whispers something that makes the other smile. Maybe they share bread from the earlier meal, or take a sip from a jug of watered ale. The house smells of wood smoke, of earth, of wool. Outside, the moon floats behind soft clouds. Inside, time barely moves. This was also the time when dreams were discussed. Remember the ones we talked about before? Well, after waking from the first sleep, it was common to share them. A wife might describe a strange vision. Her husband might interpret it, or simply listen. Families sometimes gathered quietly to speak together. Not loudly, not fully awake, but gently, like standing knee-deep in a river of night. Even peasants, with little education, had their own language for dreams. Symbols passed down by word of mouth. Meanings carried from grandmother to mother to child. And during this calm hour, the stories flowed, like the stars above, always there, always waiting to be told. Sometimes, though, the night wasn't so peaceful. Not every village was safe. So during this second period of wakefulness, some took up brief watch. Fathers might check doors, tend the fire, look out for thieves or stray wolves. Yes, wolves. In certain regions, especially colder, wooded parts of Europe, wolves still crept near human homes. So the middle of the night had attention too. Not fear, just awareness. A soft readiness. But most nights passed without trouble. The fire would be stirred, just a little. The candle snuffed, blankets pulled again over shoulders. And slowly, people would ease into their second sleep. Not with a jolt, not with a bell, just gradually. The mind sinking again, the limbs relaxing, the dreams returning. This second sleep, it was different, softer, quieter, deeper. Where the first sleep brought vivid visions and symbolic dreams, the second was more like sinking into warm water. Fewer colors, fewer sounds, just peace. It was the final rest. The gentle last half of the night, preparing the body for dawn. Let's go back to that farmhouse. Just one more time. Now. The couple lies down again. The fire is nearly gone. The cat has curled itself tightly, purring softly. Outside, the stars begin to fade, only slightly. And the house? Still, safe. A soft breath, a quiet moment, a return to sleep. And when the morning finally comes, it doesn't shout. It hums. Birds sing, softly at first. The sky moves from deep blue to gray, then to gold. And slowly, one by one, people begin to wake. Children stir. Feet touch the cool floor. The day begins. But the memory of the night, it lingers. The dreams, the silence, the space between. That's what the medieval night really was. Not just darkness, but layers. A dance between sleeping and waking. Between thinking and feeling. Between the world and something just beyond it. Maybe that space still exists. Even now. If you wake in the middle of the night and don't feel rushed, you're not broken. You're not restless. You're just remembering. A rhythm your body still knows. From long, long ago. Alright. That's enough for tonight. Rest now. In the next part, we'll explore the waking rituals of medieval life, from how people rose, to how they stretched, dressed and greeted the morning sun, and what breakfast really looked like before the rooster crowed. But for now, let your breathing slow. And if you wake later tonight, let yourself rise gently. Maybe even light a candle, say a word, and return to sleep. Welcome back. Still here? Ah, good. That means the night has settled in just enough. We've already wandered through the sleepy shadows of the medieval night. We've seen the sitting sleeper, the hush between two sleeps, the gentle prayers, and soft footsteps by the hearth. But now, it's morning. Slow, stretching, glowing morning. And in this part, we'll step into the fragile moment when sleep lets go, and the day begins. Let's see how medieval folks truly woke up, and what they did before the sun even finished rising. The light didn't burst into rooms, it crept. The world outside was still hushed, just a little louder than it had been. Birds stirred first. Their feathers rustled in that calm, chilly air. Then came the dogs. Then the chickens, scratching softly against the wood. Inside, a soft groan, a stretch, a mumble into straw bedding, the body waking, not all at once but in pieces. First the arms, then the spine, then the feet found the floor, and with a breath, the day began. Unlike today, there were no alarms, no clocks, just the rhythm of light and life. The sky turned gray before it turned gold, and the people inside the homes, they responded to that slow shift. It wasn't chaotic, it was gentle. Many would say their first words to themselves, a prayer, or a thought, or just a sigh. They might whisper, "Lord, bless the light. Let my limbs be strong. May my bread rise before the rain." Little things, spoken to no one and everyone. They didn't leap up, they sat, still groggy. They would stretch their backs, rub their eyes, lean over to touch the cold earthen floor, and they would listen. Was the fire still smoldering? Did the neighbor's rooster call yet? Were the pigs stirring in the sty? These were their clocks, subtle but reliable. The first true task, tending the fire. A little ritual really. The hearth was the heart of the home, remember? So, someone would shuffle toward it, kneel carefully, and push the old ashes aside with a small iron rod. They'd check for just one glowing ember, just one. And if it was there, a soft smile, a few dry twigs, a quiet breath, and then, flames, small, blue and orange, licking gently up into the new day. Now, with warmth building again, they would wake the rest. Children first, then elderly parents or sleeping guests. No shaking, just a hand, resting gently on a shoulder, and a whisper. Time, love. Day's coming. Get up now, the fire's lit. And come, isn't that soft? Dressing came next. No wardrobes, no fast decisions. Most peasants had just one outer tunic, and perhaps a clean one for Sundays. So they'd grab what they had, feel the cloth against their skin, and ease it over their heads. Sometimes the clothes were cold, but they warmed quickly with movement. Belts were tied, hair was braided or tucked, and then, feet found shoes. Or didn't. Because many, especially children, went barefoot indoors. Shoes were saved, for when the frost bit hard. And now we step into one of the most overlooked parts of the day, washing. It wasn't ignored, it wasn't primitive. They just did it differently. A wooden bowl, a splash of water from a jug left by the door. Cold, yes, but enough. Hands first, then the face, then a cloth across the neck, and after, the water was poured out onto the ground outside. There was a belief that this water carried sleep away with it, as if dreams clung to the skin and had to be washed free. Beautiful, isn't it? Now, as the home came to life, the smell of food began to bloom. Not grand breakfasts, not rich plates, but warm ones. A pot of porridge, perhaps, thick with oats, sometimes cooked the night before, and left by the hearth to thicken. Or, a slice of rye bread, rubbed with a garlic clove, dipped in broth if there was any. Maybe an apple, maybe dried peas from the night's stew. The point wasn't taste, it was fuel, and warmth, and something shared. Let's step into a noble household, briefly. Servants there would rise earlier than the family. They'd stir fires in grander hearths, unbar the windows, sweep straw from the stone floors, and they'd lay out food with careful hands, bread, cheese, sometimes figs, or salted fish. And for the lady of the house, warm wine with herbs, not for luxury, but to calm the stomach, to ease into the day without shock. And what about drinks? Well, they rarely drank plain water in the morning. It wasn't always safe. So most sipped small ale, a weak beer with low alcohol, or posset, a warm curdled milk with a hint of spice. Children sometimes drank it too. Warm, comforting, not sweet, but soft, something to carry the body out of sleep and into labor. And what did mornings feel like? Let's go there. Step outside with me. The ground, still dewy. Soft mist clinging to the fields. The church bell, just once, in the distance. The smell of damp earth, of straw, of bread crust burning just a little too long. Someone sharpens a blade nearby. Another leads a cow to pasture. A woman hums a song older than her grandmother. And it all blends into a morning rhythm. The sun was never rushed. It climbed slowly, spilling gold over slate roofs, warming the backs of oxen, turning puddles into clouds. And the people, they moved with it. No phones, no deadlines, just time. Time, and the soft patience of another medieval day beginning. By mid-morning, most of the world was awake. Bakers had finished their first batch, children gathered eggs, and neighbors passed each other on dirt paths, murmuring, "God grant you strength. Did your fire keep last night?" I dreamt of rain, maybe by noon, tiny rituals, tiny words, and a world that felt deeply human. So, why does it matter how they woke? Why care about the slow breath of dawn 800 years ago? Because it shows us that time wasn't always against us, that mornings didn't always start with noise, or hurry, or fear. They started with breath, touch, fire, food, and the soft understanding that life begins slowly, and that's okay. So maybe, just maybe, next time you wake, let yourself move like they did. Don't leap, don't scroll, don't panic, just sit, breathe, feel the fabric against your skin, and remember, you're not alone. This rhythm, it's ancient, older than alarm clocks, older than stress, and it still lives in your body, waiting to rise, with the light. Alright, that's it for now. We've sat at the hearth, risen with the sun, and stepped quietly into the rhythm of a forgotten morning. Next time, we'll follow the villagers out the door, to the fields, the forests, and the bustling roads of early medieval towns. What did people do all day? How did they work? What did they carry? And where did they go when sleep was far behind? We'll find out. But for now, sleep just might be near again. Of course. You're still here, still listening through the hush of the medieval night. Good. Tonight we'll walk outside the little wooden houses, past the smoldering hearths and sleeping dogs. Tonight, we follow the morning footsteps, to the fields, the forests, the muddy roads, and find out what people actually did all day in the Middle Ages. Not kings, not knights, just people, ordinary ones. Let's walk quietly behind them now, as the sky brightens softly. The first thing you'd feel, outside the house, a chill. Even in summer, mornings were often damp. The air held the weight of dew. Your feet might press into soft earth, your breath visible in tiny puffs. And before you even fully stepped away from your home, you'd hear it, the sounds of the day already beginning. A lowing cow, a creaking cart, someone sharpening a scythe against stone, a mother calling a child softly, gently. Now, each with thatched roofs, small wooden fences, smoke curling out of chimneys, the path between homes, just mud, or stone if you were lucky. People walked it every day, boots caked in dirt, or bare feet, tough and calloused. And where were they going? Everywhere, and nowhere. Let's follow a man first. He nods to his wife, gathers a small leather pouch, maybe with oats inside, and lifts a wooden hoe over his shoulder. He walks slowly at first, but with purpose. His feet know the way. He heads for the fields. In the Middle Ages, most people were farmers. Even if they weren't landowners, they worked the land, and that land wasn't always flat or neat. It was wild, patchy, sometimes shared, sometimes rented. He'd reach his strip of land, look at it quietly, maybe mutter a short prayer, and then begin digging, hoeing, turning soil, checking sprouts, watering if needed, weeding without gloves, just hands, and time. There was no lunch break, no office chat, just birds overhead, the sun moving slowly, and the occasional cough or greeting from a neighbor a few fields away. But he wasn't alone. Others worked too, often children, even wives, after chores were done. Farming wasn't a man's job. It was a family task, and they didn't see it as suffering. They saw it as life. Now, let's shift. Not all work was in the fields. Let's follow a woman now. She rises early too, ties her long hair in a braid, wraps a coarse shawl around her shoulders, takes a basket and heads to the market path. The market wasn't always far, but it was often a walk, sometimes across hills, sometimes through the edge of a forest. And along the way, she'd meet others, children carrying eggs, men with cheese wrapped in cloth, a monk with herbs, a widow with only a smile. They walked together, not rushed, just moving. By the time they reached the village center, the market was already stirring. Wooden stalls unfolded, blankets were spread, baskets were opened, and everything smelled real, fresh, earthy, sweet, sharp, sometimes a little sour. Baked bread, warmed honey, onions and leeks, fish packed in salt, ale barrels uncorked. People greeted each other softly, no shouting, just names whispered, coins clinking, deals made with handshakes and glances. Not everyone farmed or sold. Some worked with their hands in other ways. The blacksmith's hammer rang out down the lane, a sharp repetitive clang, followed by hiss and steam. He made horseshoes, locks, pots, sometimes blades. His hands were always dark with soot, his face glistened with heat, and he worked in rhythm, not fast but never stopping. Next door, a woman sat by a window, her job, spinning. She drew fibers, wool or flax between her fingers, pulled gently, twisted slowly, let the spindle turn. Hours passed like that, sometimes with humming, sometimes with silence, just the sound of thread being born. In another part of the village, a man carved wood, not grand sculptures, just bowls and spoons, handles for knives, each one shaped with care and patience. They'd sell or trade them later, but for now, the wood smelled sweet, the shavings curled like ribbons on the floor, and the carver, he just smiled. Ah, and we mustn't forget the children. What did they do all day? They helped. That's the honest answer. No school for most, at least not formal ones. They fed animals, fetched water, watched over babies, ran errands, picked berries. But in between, they played, with stones, with twine, with imagination. They chased chickens. They mimicked adults. They sang songs in circles, and told stories they'd half remember the next day. And so the day passed. There were no breaks exactly, just moments, a pause under a tree, a sip of ale from a wooden mug, a shared apple. Time wasn't chopped into hours like now. It flowed, and people flowed with it. Around midday, the sun would press down hardest, and some would rest. They'd sit in doorways, in shade, lean against barrels or trees. A quick nap, a soft gaze into the distance, a little silence. Not laziness, just wisdom. They knew how to stop when needed. Let's peek again, at the forest path. Here, others wandered too. Gatherers. They weren't farmers. They lived near the trees. They collected mushrooms, nuts, roots, wood for the fire. They walked softly. They knew the forest. Its sounds, its smells, its dangers. They weren't afraid. They were part of it. And always, sounds filled the air. Not loud, not grating, just gentle. The creak of carts, the rustle of skirts, the splash of water in wooden pails, the buzz of bees in herb gardens. Even work had a rhythm. And the day moved gently around it. By mid-afternoon, most had found their second wind. More planting, more spinning, more gathering. And beneath it all, a shared sense that life was circular. Not about achievement, but continuation. You didn't need to win the day, just tend it, like a garden. So what did people do all day in the Middle Ages? They lived, quietly, rhythmically, in tune with the earth, with each other, with the seasons. And when work was done, they didn't collapse from exhaustion. They leaned back and watched the sky soften. They listened to the geese flying overhead. They spoke in low voices by the fire, and they waited for night to come again. But we're not quite there yet. Before darkness, there is one more thing to see: the evening meal and the sacred twilight hours before the second sleep. When voices soften, flames flicker, and stories begin again. So next time, let's sit with them, at the table, by the fire, and feel how peace arrived with the setting sun. But for now, maybe you'll drift too. If you're still awake, that is, of course, welcome back. Or maybe you never left at all. Still with me, drifting softly through the quiet world of the Middle Ages. Good. Tonight, we're entering that golden moment of the day. The work is done, the sun has lowered, and shadows stretch long across the fields. This is the hour of stillness, of smells from the hearth, of simple food, and simpler comforts. Let's sit at the table and see what the evenings were truly like back then. By the time the sky turned amber, the work outside slowed. You'd hear fewer footsteps on the road. The blacksmith's hammer went silent. The market emptied, and even the children stopped chasing geese. Home, That was the next destination. And home meant warmth. Let's return to a small cottage. Its roof thatched, its walls timber framed. Inside, there is no chandelier, no glass window, only a single flame dancing in an iron holder near the hearth. Ah, the hearth. The heart of the home. Always. Dinner was being prepared hours before, usually by women, but sometimes by older children, or even a husband if the household was different. It wasn't grand, it wasn't fast, but it was familiar. A pot hung over a fire. Inside, broth, or porridge, or pottage. A mixture of grains, leeks, maybe onions, a carrot if it was available, sometimes a bone from a salted ham, maybe some herbs like sage or parsley. Everything simmered together, slowly, thickened, softened, deepened in smell, and the scent, it filled the whole house. Comforting, nutty, a little smoky, and there was bread, always bread, hard if it was a few days old, soft if you were lucky, sometimes dipped in the stew, sometimes shared with cheese or a smear of goose fat, and if it was a good day, maybe a piece of fruit, an apple, a plum, or just a spoon of honey. Sweetness was rare, so when it came, it was slow, savored, even licked from the fingers. Families didn't eat at a big polished table. They sat around a low wooden surface, cross-legged, or on stools, or just on the packed earth floor. Sometimes one person would eat while another prepared more bowls. And yes, they shared. There wasn't always a bowl for everyone. Sometimes the meal was served from one pot, and each person dipped their own spoon in, quietly, respectfully. There were no menus, no choices. You ate what was there, and gave thanks if it was warm. Just what you chip you was warm. Chehiwin spuhal fittins. After the food, not cleaning, not yet. First came talking. Families didn't rush off to stare at glowing rectangles. They simply stayed. They told little stories, small happenings from the day. Someone laughed about how the pig got loose. Someone else mentioned a funny thing seen on the road. Children asked questions about the stars, about saints, about the next festival. No one interrupted. They just listened. Sometimes a guest would be there, a neighbor, a cousin, a wandering friar, or a traveling seller who knew to knock politely at the right time. Guests were respected, given a bit more food, a warmer place by the fire, maybe the soft blanket if it was cold. It wasn't luxury, it was hospitality. Old-fashioned, sacred. As the pot cooled, the dishes were cleaned, but not with soap. Water from the bucket, wiped with cloth, dried by fire. Everything was reused. Wooden bowls, wooden spoons, even bones, if any were left, were set aside, maybe for the dog, or to boil again later. Nothing wasted, ever. And then, after eating, came one of the most calming, beautiful rituals of all. Story time. Not with a book. Most couldn't read, but with voices. Low, slow, dreamlike. A grandfather might clear his throat and begin a tale about a knight who once fought a bear with nothing but a stick, or a fox who tricked a greedy monk, or about a ghost that haunted the mill, but only on cold Thursdays. Everyone listened. The fire crackled softly. Children curled closer to parents. The storyteller spoke like a weaver, tugging thread here, letting it drift there. Sometimes there were gasps, giggles, a soft moom from someone who'd heard the tale before but still enjoyed it. Outside, the sky was darker now, and there were stars. Bright ones. No cities. No lights to wash them away. Just the open night sky. Black speckled with quiet flames. People might glance out the door, breathe the cool air, feel small, and yet perfectly placed. Before sleep, there was sometimes prayer. Nothing loud. No choirs. Just quiet words. A sign of the cross. A thank you whispered. For warmth. For bread. For one more day. Now, there's something else. Something curious. After the evening. After food. After prayers. People didn't always go straight to sleep. No, there was something called first sleep. And later, let's say it's 8 o'clock. You lie down. You sleep for a few hours. Then, around midnight, you wake up. And that's normal. No one panics. It's expected. The time between the sleeps is a special moment. You might sit by the hearth, stir the embers, pray a little longer, even visit a neighbor quietly. Some used the time for intimacy, others for writing, if they were literate. Some just sat, watching the fire, and then after about an hour or two, they'd go back to bed, for the second sleep. So if you wake up at 2 a.m. some nights, don't worry. Medieval people did too. It was part of the rhythm of life. Not a flaw, just nature. And now, the fire's nearly out. Only red coals remain. The room is quiet. The bowls are stacked. The children are already dreaming. The adults are slipping into stillness. Outside, the wind brushes the trees gently. Inside, the darkness is soft. Not scary. Not strange. Just there. Let's close the door gently. Let them rest. But there's more still to see. More to understand. Because while most homes drifted into peace, there were still people awake. Some had work that never ended. Let's visit them next. In the quietest hour, where silence carries echoes. But for now, maybe just let your own thoughts settle. And drift. Of course, we're still gliding gently through this soft flickering world of the Middle Ages. And tonight? We're not staying by the hearth anymore. No, the embers are low. The doors are bolted. And most are asleep in their beds, sitting up, wrapped tight, half covered in dreams. But not everyone. Because not all jobs could wait until morning. There were people who kept moving, working, breathing into the silence, while others dreamed. Let's step quietly, slowly now, and find out just who they were. Ah, our first stop, the bakers. Yes, that warm smell you love, crusty, soft bread, right at dawn. That doesn't appear by magic. Nope, bread meant someone was up all night. Let's look inside a baker's house. There's a long wooden table, a heavy cloth tossed over it, sacks of flour leaning in the corner. At the very back, a wide blackened oven, stone or clay, still warm from earlier, but soon to blaze again. The baker, maybe a man, maybe a woman, maybe an older apprentice, stirs quietly. Flour dust lifts into the air. Water is poured from a jug. Yeast if they had it, or just saved dough from yesterday. Squish, knead, squish, fold. The sound of hands in dough, soft, repetitive, hypnotic. They would shape the loaves with slow skill. Rounds, ovals, flat discs, marked sometimes with little notches. And then, they'd wait. Let the dough rise. In the cool night, that could take longer. So they'd light a little fire. Not too close, just enough warmth. And as the dough puffed gently, the baker would sit, breathe, wait. Sometimes sipping a little broth. Sometimes nodding off a moment, only to check the dough again. Then before dawn came the fire. The real one. Oven doors open, wood tossed in, smoke curls upwards. And one by one, the loaves are placed inside. No timer, no dial, just instinct. Listen, you can almost hear the crust beginning to crackle. The smell creeps through the alleyways, down cobbled streets, even into sleepy bedrooms, where heads shift slightly on hay-stuffed pillows. Because morning is coming. And the baker, still working, still shaping, still watching. By the time the village rises, that first warm loaf will be ready. Maybe with a bit of cheese, maybe dipped in honey, or just eaten plain. But it will taste like morning, and it was born in the quiet hours of night. Now, we step away. Softly, carefully. There's another figure just beyond the village edge. Do you hear that? A clink, clink, swish. That's the miller. Yes, the one who grinds grain into flour. And he is never really sleeping either. Let's find him. The mill isn't inside the town. Nope, it needs water. So we walk past sleeping chickens, past silent gardens, to the river. There it is, a tall, strange-shaped building. Stone base, wooden top, and a great wheel turning slowly in the dark. Rurs, skrick komting. That's the sound of the gears turning. The stones grinding. The wheat becoming flour. Now the miller is inside. He's not loud, but he's busy. Watching the grain pour from sacks. Checking that the stones aren't heating too much. Adjusting the wooden paddles that feed the grain. He might have a candle near him. A stubby one. Or maybe just moonlight filtering through the cracks. White dust covers his sleeves. His nose. Even his hair a little. But he doesn't mind. He's thinking of the trade tomorrow. Of how the baker needs the flour before sunrise. Of how people will knock on his door at dawn, asking for their portion. So he keeps working. Not fast, not loud. Just steady, careful, and a little lonely. But that's all right. Some work is meant for solitude. Further out now, into the fields. Strange, right? But some people, the poorest, took this hour to guard their little crops. Especially if it was near harvest. Because thieves came at night. People hungry, desperate, sometimes even animals. Boars, wolves, birds. So a farmer might sit awake, wrapped in a cloak, listening for sounds. Maybe on a little stool, maybe near a scarecrow, watching his barley wave gently in the wind. And he'd nod off, and wake suddenly, at the snap of a twig. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Let's return now. Back toward the village. The baker's fire is lower. The millstone turns slower. But there's one more soul still walking. Someone you may not expect. The night watchman. He wears a thick coat, carries a lantern, and maybe a stick or a small bell. He doesn't have a sword or armor, just alert eyes and a quiet pace. His job? To walk around the edges of the village, past the walls, down every alley, past every gate. He listens. He watches. And every hour or so, he rings a little bell, or shouts something like, "All is well, it's the 3rd hour of night." So if someone is lying awake, or stirring from first sleep, they hear his voice, and know it's safe. Someone's watching. Now and then, he stops by the church. Yes, the door may be locked, but he touches the wood, maybe says a prayer under his breath, not because he must, but because it's habit, comfort. He checks the graveyard, the fence, the little candle that flickers by a shrine. He hums something under his breath, maybe a hymn, maybe a lullaby his mother used to sing, and then, on he walks, round and round, till the sky begins to shift. Dawn. The stars fade. Roosters stretch their wings. A dog barks once, then again. A door creaks. A sleepy child stirs on their wooden bed, and the night workers, they begin to rest. The baker dusts flour from his hands. The miller stores his sacks. The watchman leans against a wall and finally closes his eyes. And a new day begins. But wait, one last thing. There's one place that never fully slept. One building where candles glowed softly even in the dark. Where prayers whispered through cold stone halls. Where footsteps echoed even at 3 a.m. Yes, the monastery, where monks lived. Let's go there next. To find out just how quiet silence can truly be. When silence is part of devotion. Of course. Let's return now to that quiet place we glimpsed at the very end of last time. The monastery. Still, and heavy with silence, but not asleep. Because in the Middle Ages, monks didn't sleep the same way most people did. They lived by the rhythm of something else entirely. Not sunlight, not market bells, but prayer. Set times, every single day, and night. Even when the world was dark and still. So now, let's step softly, very softly, through a thick wooden door, into the cold echoing world of the monastic night. Spories, look at these stone walls. They rise so high, covered in ivy. Windows shaped like half moons. And just there, a bell tower. It doesn't ring like a town bell. No, this bell is gentler, more hollow, more sacred. And when it sounds, ding ding ding, it's not to warn, it's to wake, to call, to remind. Because monks didn't sleep through the night. They had what we might call interrupted sleep. But to them, it was part of their vow, their discipline. So even at midnight, or 2 in the morning, they'd rise, quietly. No candles flaring, no talking, just the sound of robes, soft feet, and slow, steady breathing. Let's enter their dormitory. Stone walls, rows of wooden beds, no pillows, just straw mattresses, maybe a single wool blanket. Most monks slept in their robes. They didn't undress for sleep. Their heads rested lightly, no tossing, no sighing, and when the bell rang, they got up without a word, eyes half closed, movements slow, and walked barefoot, usually down a dim corridor, toward the church. This is the heart of the monastery, a vast space, cool air drifting along stone tiles, tall arches, a single flame flickering in a wall-mounted lamp. The monks gather in rows, each at their place. No one speaks. Instead, the voice of one monk begins to chant, slow, deep, almost like a breath that turns into music. Then the others join him. Not loud, just steady, peaceful. Words in Latin, usually. Sometimes in harmony, sometimes whispered. And for the next hour, that's what fills the night. Not dreams, but devotion. After prayers, they return. Not to chatter, not to food, just to sleep again. Until the next bell. Yes, there wasn't just one midnight prayer. There were 7 throughout the day and night. It was called the Divine Office. Let me list them. Gently, matins, in the very early dark. Lauds, just before sunrise. Prime, at the first hour of morning. Terce, mid-morning. Sext, noon. None, mid-afternoon. Vespers, early evening. And Compline, just before rest. Ah, that's 8. Yes, they added one more overtime. So many soft bells in one day. And between each prayer, life happened slowly. Reading scriptures, copying books by hand, gardening, tending to the sick, feeding the poor, sweeping, but always returning to silence, to prayer, even in the deepest parts of night. Let's follow one monk now. He's younger, still learning the rhythm of this strange, beautiful life. His name might be Thomas, or maybe Guillaume. And tonight, he stirs before the bell. Eyes open, the dormitory is hushed. Only a few snores, soft as wind. He kneels by his straw bed, not because he must, but because it feels right. He whispers a prayer, maybe one he remembers from his mother, or maybe one he's invented quietly inside. Then he stands, brushes hay from his robe, and walks. His feet are cold, but he doesn't mind. Now we see the scriptorium. Not active now, but waiting. Tables, ink pots, stacks of parchment, goose feather quills. This is where monks would copy books by hand. Ah, not just scripture either. Herbal texts, old Roman poems, even cookbooks, sometimes, all in careful lines. It could take a whole year to copy one book, but the monks didn't rush. No, they believed that beauty was part of worship, and every letter was a form of prayer. Outside, the gardens rest, but earlier, they were full of soft rustles and careful hands. Monks tended herbs like thyme, rosemary, lavender. They picked leaves for teas, roots for salves, petals for ointments. Their garden wasn't loud. No plows, no shouting, just one monk, reaching gently into the earth to find medicine, or flavor, or just peace. Now, if you peek down a hallway, you'll see a guest room, simple, sparse. But if a traveler had knocked earlier, they'd be let in, given soup, a place to rest. Monasteries were like lanterns along the road, always glowing, even faintly, even in night, especially in night. As dawn begins to stretch, the monks gather again, lauds. Their voices rise with the sun, soft, stronger now, still calm. And as they finish, the sky turns pink, then gold. The fields wake, the birds begin, and the monastery is alive again, but without rush, always gentle, always sacred. As the monks move back toward their tasks, we take one last look at a row of sandals by the door, at candles flickering out, at parchment curled under a weight, and we whisper goodbye, because the monastery is always awake, even when no one else is. But sleep is calling again, and just beyond the village, somewhere between silence and rest, there's one more place we haven't visited yet, the noble household. Yes, you've wondered, haven't you? What did the rich sleep on? What did they do at night? And did they sit up too? We'll find out next. Of course, let's take a gentle breath, settle your thoughts, and wander now into a new chamber of the past. We've passed through muddy cottages, through inns and taverns, through fields and through monasteries cloaked in candlelight. But now we step through something else entirely. A wide, creaking wooden door, gilded edges, iron hinges, smells like lavender and old wood smoke. Welcome to the noble home, where sleep was a very different thing indeed. The first thing you notice isn't the furniture. It isn't even the size of the place. It's the warmth. Yes. Unlike the peasant cottages, where chill clung to every breath, these homes had fires in nearly every room. Stone hearths, sometimes carved with little vines or lions. Some even had tapestries right over the hearth to keep the warmth from escaping. But those tapestries, soft wool or silk, woven with scenes of forests, of unicorns, of noble hunts, and they did more than decorate. They kept the chill out of the stone walls. They made nighttime quieter, softer, even warmer. Now let's go deeper in. Step carefully over the rushes. Those are plants scattered across the floor. Not rugs, no carpets yet. Just layers of dried herbs and hay and straw, sometimes mixed with crushed rose petals or chamomile, to scent the air as people walked over them. You might hear a soft crunch beneath your feet. Calming, isn't it? Even the floor felt like part of the night. Now, look to your left. There is the bedchamber. Big doors, thick drapes, and inside. Now this is a medieval bed for a noble. 4 tall wooden posts, heavy velvet curtains, woolen blankets layered with furs, feathers inside the mattress if you were rich enough, and linen sheets. Not scratchy like hemp, oh no. Linen felt like cool water and sunlight, even in the dark. And just above the bed, sometimes a small canopy, to keep out dust, to keep in warmth, to feel protected. Now, let's imagine someone in this room, a noblewoman perhaps. Her name might be Lady Isolda. She's brushing her hair by candlelight, using a comb made of bone. She's wearing a night shift, something like a soft gown, plain and long. No corsets, no jewels, just loose flowing linen. She sits near the fire. Her maid quietly adds a log. The room flickers with gold and orange light. And, before she sleeps, she drinks something warm, perhaps warmed ale, with a bit of honey, or milk steeped with thyme and cloves. She doesn't climb into bed right away. No, she writes something first, by hand, slowly. Letters to cousins, a note to the steward, a prayer. The ink is thick. The quill squeaks slightly on the parchment. She dries it with sand, folds it carefully. Then, she finally stands, draws the bed curtains, and settles beneath the covers. On her back, at first, then upright. Not because she prefers it, but because even here, even in silk and warmth, they still feared the idea that sickness floated on damp, heavy air, especially at night, especially when lying flat. So even in a noble bed, the fear lingered. People propped themselves up slightly, with bolsters, with pillows, or with special wooden supports beneath their shoulders. It was thought to protect the lungs, to keep phlegm from building up, to keep sleep from becoming too vulnerable. And there were other reasons for the upright position. Let's think. Think of digestion. A full stomach, from a large noble feast, felt heavy when lying down. So sitting up eased the pressure, helped the food settle. Sometimes, they'd even fall asleep while still sitting at the fire, wrapped in furs, only to be gently moved to the bed later by a servant. Now, let's visit another noble household. This one, a lord, maybe a minor baron. His chamber is darker, a little more masculine. Thick beams overhead, a bearskin rug, weapons hung neatly on a rack. He sleeps alone sometimes. Other nights, his hunting hounds curl up by the fire. And before sleep, he drinks something too. But not milk, more likely mead, or mulled wine. He paces a little, speaks to no one, and then finally removes his tunic, his belt, lays his sword by the bed, and lowers himself onto the furs, back against the headboard, head slightly lifted, eyes closing slowly. Can you hear the fire crackle? Can you smell the spiced wine? This was his version of sleep. Still careful, still guarded, still a little upright. Even the pillows had their own stories. Some were embroidered with prayers, others stuffed with herbs like lavender or mint. The smell of crushed leaves beneath your head. It's calming even now, isn't it? Sometimes they'd place dried roses in sachets near the pillows, or hang bundles of herbs over the bedposts. Just a soft charm for restful dreams, or protection from the night. Now, let's wander to the nursery, where the noble children lay. They had smaller beds, of course, sometimes cradles for babies, but they too were propped a bit. Even infants were raised slightly at the head. For health, for warmth, for caution. Nurses sat nearby, watching with sleepy eyes, whispering lullabies under their breath. Not in English, often, sometimes Latin, sometimes French, the languages of nobility. But soft is soft, in any tongue. Let's pause now. Sit in the corner of the room. The fire is still glowing. The drapes are closed. The chamber is still. Only the faintest breeze sneaks through the cracks in the stone walls. And even in all this warmth, they still dreamed of danger. Burglars, witchcraft, demons. So charms were hung over the bed, sometimes shaped like crosses, other times like strange knots or ancient symbols. Quiet protections, whispers in metal and thread. By now, everyone in the manor is at rest. The guards have taken their posts. The kitchen hearth has gone out. The animals in the stables have curled up in straw. And the noble homes, with all their silk and pillows, and firelight, still carry something old, something cautious, a fear of night, that no amount of gold could entirely erase. But now, let us drift through another chamber door, past a flickering sconce, down a stairwell made of worn stone, because there's another side of noble life we haven't seen yet. Not the bed, but the servants' quarters. Ah, yes, we're going there next, because sleep looked very different down below. And if you think they slept lying down, think again. Now we're heading downward. Deeper than tapestries and carved canopy beds. Deeper than embroidered pillows and flickering noble fires. Let's go. Down. Stone steps beneath the manor, smooth and slightly cold underfoot. The flickering torchlight dances on the walls. You might hear a soft clang of pots, or the distant murmur of sleepy voices. We've entered the world of the servants. And here, sleep was not a ritual. It was not a time of peace or preparation. It was simply what came when the work finally stopped. Let's take a moment here. Just pause. The stone corridor is quiet. except for a mouse maybe, or a kettle cooling on the hearth. The rooms down here are small, often shared, sometimes damp, sometimes smelling of onions and soap and coal. The air, not sweet like lavender sachets, not scented with rose petals, but heavy and real, and warm from a day's work. Now, imagine her, a kitchen maid named Elise. She's been up since before dawn, plucking geese, tending broth, scouring pots that seem bigger than she is. Her hands are raw, her eyes are red from smoke, but she's finally allowed to rest. So she tiptoes into the small room she shares with 3 other girls, takes off her apron, washes her face in cold water, and pulls a wool blanket from a rough shelf. There is no bed, not tonight. Instead, she finds a clear space by the hearth, rolls herself in the blanket, and rests her head on a folded tunic. Ah, not upright like a noble, but not quite lying flat either. More like curled, hunched, as if she still isn't quite off duty. Now imagine the butler, or perhaps a steward. He has a bed. Small, wooden, creaky, stuffed with straw, pushed into a corner behind the cellar door. He sleeps sitting up most nights, not because he's afraid of bad air, but because he's expected to be ready, always. The master might need him, the dogs might bark, the wine might run dry, so he sleeps in his clothes, with one boot still on, one ear open, waiting. The washerwoman, she sometimes fell asleep at the washtub, literally, bent forward, elbows on the rim, head resting on her arms, and no one woke her, because sleep was precious, rare, and no one dared steal it, even by mistake. Even the servants' hall, when empty, became a sleeping place. The benches, the floor, sometimes the table itself, where the stable boy might curl up beneath it, still smelling of hay and manure and horses. He'd nestle into his cloak, use a saddle pad as a pillow, and drift off to the clop-clop of horse dreams. And just like the nobles feared bad air, so too did the servants. They stuffed cloth under doors, hung sprigs of garlic by windows. Some even slept with their heads near the fire, so they'd breathe warmth, not the damp. And though they could rarely afford real herbs for pillows, sometimes they'd sneak rosemary or thyme from the kitchen, tuck it into their shirt. Just a little comfort, a little safety. Let's visit the laundry chamber now. Here, everything smells of wet linen. Steam still hangs in the air. You'll find 3 girls asleep in a row, wrapped in old sheets that didn't pass inspection, their legs curled up, knees to chest, and above them, wooden beams thick with spider webs. They sleep so still, so quiet. The only sound is the drip, drip of water from a leaky jug. Calm, isn't it? Even in the roughest places, the night makes everything softer. But not all servants slept below ground. Some lived in the attic, just under the rafters, right beneath the cold roof slates. Up there, the wind howls through the cracks, the floor groans with every step. The bed, if there is one, sags like a ship at sea. Still, it's better than the floor. And the girl who sleeps there, she has a tiny wax candle, a comb, and a pebble from the river that she keeps for luck. She props herself up slightly against the wall. She's heard the noble lady does the same. And maybe, just maybe, that will help her dream better too. Ah, and now we must mention something. The night watches. Not everyone was allowed to sleep. In many manors, a servant was chosen to keep watch, to patrol the halls, check the locks, feed the fire. He might sit by the kitchen hearth, armed with only a poker, and he'd nod off in bursts. 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there, never fully asleep, never fully awake. Some say it was the loneliest duty, but others, they liked it, because it was quiet. The only time they were alone all day. Let's sit with one of them now. A boy named Tom. He's maybe 14, wrapped in a heavy cloak, feet near the embers. He watches the flames as they turn from orange, to red, to ash, and his head starts to nod. But he shakes it off, then lets it fall again. Just a little sleep, just a little warmth. He hums to himself, a song his mother sang when he was smaller. It's off-key, but soft. Almost like a lullaby for the whole house. And so the night passes. Not all at once, but in scattered little pieces. A maid asleep by the oven. A cook snoring in a chair. A page boy curled under the staircase. Some sleep sitting up. Some sleep on their side. Some sleep with eyes half open. Because they must. Because sleep for a servant is like a coin. Small, hard-earned, and too easy to lose. And yet, somehow, they dreamed too. of summer days in the meadow, of warm bread and butter, of dancing, of sleeping in a real bed, just once. So, if you think the noble bed was the center of medieval sleep, think again, because in the kitchens and the lofts and the cellars, sleep had 1,000 shapes, and most of them were curled, cautious, and never fully at rest. But come now, step back into the hallway. The torches are nearly burned low, but there's one more place to visit tonight. It's not a manor, not a cottage, not even a monastery. It's a place of learning, of ink, and parchment and candles burning long past dusk. We're going to the medieval university dormitory, because students, even back then, had strange ways of sleeping, some even stranger than today. Let's go. Alright. Now that we've left behind the dark kitchens and dusty servant halls, let's open a heavier door, a wooden one, old and slightly warped. It creaks. There we are. Welcome to the world of medieval university students. Yes, they existed, and they weren't always what you'd expect. Young, often restless, sometimes from noble families, sometimes from towns and villages far away, but all of them, huddled in narrow dormitories, trying to learn Latin, and trying quite desperately to sleep. Let's begin in Paris. The year, maybe around 1280. The university is growing. Its halls echo with prayers, debates, and the scratch of quills on parchment. But where do these students live? Where do they sleep? Not in grand chambers with 4-poster beds. No, they sleep in small rented rooms, above shops or tucked inside narrow alley buildings. Some sleep 3 to a room, others even 5 or 6, each space lit by just one flickering candle. Let's meet a student named Gerund. He's from a fishing village in the north, and now, he's in a city he doesn't fully understand, surrounded by books he can barely afford, and lectures that start at dawn. His bed? It's not really a bed, more like a wooden box. No mattress, just a bundle of straw, wrapped in an old wool sheet. He shares the room with 2 other boys, and all of them sleep sitting up against the wall. Why? Well, for one, the rats. Yep, lying flat meant becoming a late-night snack for little teeth. Also, the cold. The walls are thin. The wind slides in like a whisper, especially under the door. So sitting up, wrapped in a heavy cloak, with arms crossed and knees pulled tight, that felt safer. You might imagine they had pillows, but mostly they didn't. Instead, they'd use their satchels, or roll up their tunics, or even rest their heads on closed books. Sleeping on your textbook. Seems some things never change. Now let's look at the dormitory itself. Stone walls. No insulation. A single window, barely glazed. And the sounds? A cough from the room next door. A bell ringing in the distance. A dog barking in the courtyard. And someone, always someone, still scribbling notes by candlelight. Even sleep was never fully quiet. But let's imagine the next night. Jorund is exhausted. He's spent hours copying a long Latin passage. His fingers are cramped. His eyes are sore. So he wraps himself in his cloak, sits down on the wooden bench near the stove, and leans his head back against the wall. The heat is fading. The candle's nearly out. And slowly, he dozes off, still in his boots, still holding a feathered quill. There's a strange peace in that image, isn't there? So much noise in his day, so much confusion. But now, just the dark, the warmth of a fading fire, and sleep. Not perfect sleep, not deep sleep, but enough. Elsewhere in the same building, another student is still awake. Her name is Margery. Yes, women studied too. Not often, and not always openly. But it happened. Margery is clever. And she's hiding. Not from danger, but from rules. Because she's reading a medical scroll she borrowed. And the curfew bell has long since rung. So she's huddled in her corner, wrapped in a blanket, a candle guttering beside her. She won't sleep yet. But when she does, she'll curl up sitting. Just like Gerund, her knees tight to her chest, her book under her arm, her eyes still half dreaming of diagrams and bones and strange curious words. In another dormitory, this one in Bologna, the setup is different. Here, the students live above the university hall. Wooden floors, narrow cots, but the same problems: cold, noise, and yes, the strict nighttime prayer schedule. Students were expected to rise in the middle of the night, to chant psalms, recite verses, and sometimes even take notes in the dark. So many of them didn't lie down fully. Instead, they slept sitting, so it was easier to rise, easier to stay half awake. Almost like monks. And let's visit a student in Oxford now. He's older, maybe 23. His name is Alan. He's studying law. And his room, it's above a tannery. So the smell is strong. Leather, smoke, salt. But he doesn't mind, because he has a small chest to sit on, and a tiny window that lets in starlight. He places his candle carefully, tucks a scrap of parchment under his chin, and falls asleep upright, arms crossed, because it's warmer that way. And because, it's just what students did. Sometimes they even slept in the lecture hall. Yes, truly. When lectures ran too long, or when a master droned on too quietly, you'd find boys nodding off in their seats, heads bobbing, eyes fluttering, but still sitting upright, and no one scolded them, because everyone understood. They'd been up all night, studying, copying, reading by firelight, and this was simply what happened. Oh, and let's not forget, many students were poor, so poor in fact, that they rented space on benches at night. Just a spot, just a plank. They'd pay a few coins, sit with their backs to the wall, knees pulled in, and that's where they'd sleep. In public, in quiet corners of taverns, or tucked near the church steps, wrapped in their cloaks, eyes closed. Some even leaned on each other. No shame in that, just tired, and grateful for stillness. And then, there were the books. Ah yes, books were so rare, so precious, that some students slept with them. Literally. They'd place them under their tunic, hide them beneath their cloak, clutch them like a loaf of bread. Because if they lost it, they couldn't afford another. And because in a strange way, it comforted them. As if knowledge itself might seep into their dreams. Now, take a breath. Look around this candlelit world of parchment and prayer. You can see the outlines of bodies in shadow, hunched, still, wrapped in old wool, not quite lying down, not quite alert. They sleep in fragments, in corners, with candles still burning nearby, and the soft scratch of rats in the rafters. It's not peaceful, really, but it's real, and oddly, beautiful, because even among the chaos of studies and sermons, sleep finds its way. Always. Ah, and before we end tonight, let me show you one last student. He's sitting in a window ledge. A breeze lifts his hair. He's leaning back, chin tilted, eyes closed, not snoring, just resting, with a half-written line of Latin still drying beside him. And in his sleep, maybe he dreams, not of lectures or ink stains, but of home, of birdsong, of fresh bread, of fields and streams and voices that don't speak in Latin. And maybe, just maybe, that's why he sleeps sitting up, because lying down might make the dream go away. And tonight, he wants to hold on to it just a little longer. Alright, now we step out of this ancient dormitory, gently, quietly, because there's still one more place to visit. The world of sleep doesn't end at the walls of schools or castles. Next we'll travel into the lives of merchants and their families, where beds were part of business, where sleep had to fit between candles and coins, and where sitting up was just practical. Come along, we'll peek behind the shutters, next time. Alright, let's step into a different kind of room now. Not a scholar's cell, not a peasant's loft, not a lord's chilly stone chamber, but the warm, slightly cluttered back room of a merchant's home. Can you smell that? It's wax, leather, dried herbs, and just a faint whiff of roasted onions. This is where the business of the Middle Ages slept, and oddly enough, they slept sitting up too. So tonight, we meet a merchant named Elias. Elias sells cloth. He travels sometimes, but mostly stays near the markets in his town. His home isn't grand, but it's comfortable. There's a small shop in the front, and behind it, where we are now, is where his family lives. Now here's the curious part. Elias has a bed, a good one, wooden frame, thick mattress of feathers, even a decent canopy overhead. But he doesn't always sleep in it, not fully anyway, because Elias has habits, little ones, shaped by years of being on call. You see, in towns and cities during the later Middle Ages, merchants often worked strange hours. The night could bring deliveries, urgent orders, or even unexpected visitors. And so, many merchants slept sitting up, partially dressed, in chairs, or small benches beside the hearth, so they could rise quickly if needed. Elias often draped a heavy wool cloak over his shoulders, sat by the fire with a ledger on his lap, and dozed. Not all night, just in short rests. Now imagine that room again. Stone floor covered in woven mats, a cat curled near the embers, a wooden table with scattered scrolls. Elias sits, eyes closed, hands folded, head gently nodding forward now and then. Around him, the quiet rustle of the town, a distant horse's hooves, the clink of metal from the tavern nearby, maybe a faint song, drifting in from a neighbor's window. He's not fully asleep, but not awake, either. Now upstairs, his wife Isabetta tends to the children. 2 boys and a girl, all asleep in a single bed, limbs tangled. She doesn't lie down either. She sits, upright against the headboard. Her hair still braided. She's tired. Of course she is. But if the youngest stirs, or if someone knocks at the door, she wants to be ready. That's the key. Readiness. And that's why sitting sleep was so common. Let's talk about those beds. Merchant homes often had beds with high headboards and pillows that were propped upright. It was a way to show wealth, but also comfort. Sleeping fully flat was associated with the very poor, or the very ill. So many people like Elias and Isabetta chose to sleep propped up, sometimes with 2 or even 3 pillows behind their back, or with a specially carved chair at the side of the room. Not for sitting during the day, but for sleeping in. There's something almost noble about that, isn't there? To sleep with one eye half open, always half ready, never quite letting your guard down, because life, especially for a merchant, could change with a single knock on the door. And then, there's travel. Ah yes, merchants on the road didn't always find inns. Sometimes they stayed in stables, sometimes with distant cousins, sometimes with fellow merchants, sharing a floor. And in all those places, you didn't lie down. You found a bench, a wall, a cloak to wrap around yourself. You sat, and you dozed, and that was enough. Now imagine a journey. Elias has traveled to Bruges. He's sharing a cart with another cloth trader. They've stopped in a small village. There's an inn, yes, but no rooms left. So they sleep in the dining hall. Benches lined up, boots still on. Elias keeps one hand on his money pouch. His head leans back, his eyes close. It's not comfortable, but it's normal. And in the morning, he'll rise, stretch, drink a mug of hot ale, and carry on. Let's shift again. Inside Elias's shop, there's a small room near the back, filled with bolts of fabric, soft wool, fine linen, dusty velvet. Sometimes during a slow afternoon, he sneaks a nap there. Not on the floor, no, but sitting on a stool, leaning back against the shelves, his dog at his feet, the fabric smelling faintly of lavender and dust. He's just resting, just enough to ease the ache in his back, to give his mind a moment of stillness. That's what sleep was, not a long escape, just small, frequent moments of quiet. And then there's the market days. Oh, the early mornings, the chaos of unloading carts, calling out prices, handling coins with cold fingers. By midday, merchants were worn thin. Some found a quiet corner of their stall, a crate to lean against, a cloak to pull over their eyes, and sat, just for a few minutes, eyes closed, not quite sleep. And women merchants, yes, there were many. Isabetta, for example, sells beeswax and herbs. She has her own stall. She spends her evenings sorting herbs under candlelight. And when she rests, she doesn't lie down either. She sits in the corner of her room, a shawl over her shoulders, a kettle warming nearby, and her eyes slowly droop as she listens to the soft pop of the fire. Let's take one last glance tonight. Elias and Isabetta, their home now dark, the children asleep upstairs, and in the back room, the shop. Elias sits in his chair, his cloak wrapped around him, his ledger closed. He's not snoring, he's not moving, just breathing, evenly, softly, sitting up, like always. Why? Because it was easier, because it was warmer, because it felt safer, and because, well, in a world where everything could change by morning, it helped to sleep as if you might need to rise at any moment. Even in sleep, they stayed connected to the world around them, quietly, gently, calmly, just like that. Now, let's take another breath, and get ready, because next we'll slip into the world of inns and taverns, where sleep was a bit more public, a bit more chaotic, and yet, somehow, even more fascinating. We'll hear whispers from behind wooden doors, watch travelers wrap themselves in cloaks near the fire, and learn how sleep, even shared among strangers, still came with an upright spine. Let's head there, in the next part. Alright, let's walk into a different space tonight. Can you hear that? Soft laughter, footsteps on old wooden floors, and somewhere, a lute being played, just barely in tune. We're in a medieval inn now, but not the kind you might think of from storybooks. No roaring fireplaces and warm pies. No grand halls or cozy single beds. Instead, imagine narrow hallways, straw-stuffed mattresses, and sometimes, more people than space. Tonight, let's explore how travelers slept, sitting up, side by side, in places meant for rest, but never for privacy. We meet a woman named Merritt. She's been walking for 2 days, carrying small items for trade, cloth scraps, beeswax, a little pouch of herbs. And tonight, she's finally reached an inn. It's small, just 2 stories. One large room downstairs, with benches and tables, and a cramped sleeping room upstairs. When she enters, her feet ache. She doesn't expect comfort, she only hopes for a bench, and maybe some warmth. Now here's where it gets interesting. In most medieval inns, especially the cheaper ones, travelers did not get their own beds. Often beds were shared, by 2, 3, or even 4 people, and if there weren't enough beds, you found a bench, a stool, the corner of a stairwell, and you sat. You wrapped your cloak tightly, you leaned back, and drifted off, still wearing your shoes, still holding your bag, because you never quite knew who else might be watching. So, Merritt pays her coin. The innkeeper, a stout man with tired eyes, nods toward the stairs, but she doesn't climb them, not yet. She sees the hearth downstairs, and near it, a bench, empty. So, she chooses that spot, her bag under her feet, her back to the wall, her arms crossed gently over her chest. She exhales, and closes her eyes. All around her the inn shifts. A man coughs, someone mutters in their sleep. A mug falls, but no one reacts. This is sleep in a public space. This is sleep, with one eye open. And here's the truth. Sitting upright wasn't just practical. It was safer. You didn't risk being vulnerable. You didn't risk being robbed. You didn't even risk looking too relaxed. Sitting kept you prepared. Now upstairs, things aren't much better. 6 travelers, 2 beds. They lie diagonally, curled up like spoons, heads propped on bags. No one speaks much. Because sleep, here, is not for dreaming. It's for recovering. Resting your legs, easing the pain in your lower back, breathing through sore muscles and tight belts. And in places like this, snoring becomes background noise. So does coughing. So do the rats, scuttling beneath the floorboards. But oddly, sleep still comes. Not the deep, weightless kind, but the brief, upright, eyes half-closed kind. The kind where your head tilts, just a little, before jerking back up, and again, and again. Let's shift to another inn, in a busier town. This one is near a church, and tonight, a festival just ended. The inn is full, not a single bed free, but still, travelers arrive. Some sit on the stairs, some even curl in corners, holding their cloaks around their knees. This is communal sleep, but it's fragmented. A few minutes here, half an hour there, always sitting, always light. Now here's a strange little truth. Some people even preferred sitting up in inns. Why? Because they feared the beds more than the floor. Beds carried lice, fleas, bedbugs. So some travelers chose a bench, a windowsill, a stool by the fire, because sitting upright might mean fewer bites in the morning. Isn't that curious? Picture a rainy night. A group of pilgrims gathers at a roadside inn. They're wet, hungry, and so tired they barely speak. The innkeeper gestures to a loft above the barn. And there, amid the hay and the smell of animals, they find spots. One woman sits against a beam, her hands under her cloak. A man leans against a barrel, nodding off. Another sits cross-legged on a blanket, mumbling prayers before sleep. No one lies flat. It's too damp, too crowded, too risky. And then there were the night watches. Some inns hired night guards. Sometimes it was just a boy with a bell. Sometimes nothing at all. So travelers took turns watching. One would sit upright, eyes open, while the others tried to sleep. An hour later, they'd switch. Sitting sleep again. Only now, it's purposeful, and slightly heroic. Now let's go to a port town. This inn sits near the docks. It's rowdy, noisy, and always full. Here, sleeping upright isn't just common, it's expected. The sailors drink, then slump against tables. Fishermen rest their heads on barrels. Traders sit in corners, arms folded, eyes closed, and no one lies down. Why would they? There's no space, no time, and no point. Sleep is brief, quick, and taken where it comes. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine what it must have felt like to be surrounded by strangers, the sounds of breathing, coughing, rustling cloaks. To know that no one around you would dream, but everyone would rest. In small upright doses. It's oddly comforting, in a strange way. And remember, even those who could afford more, merchants, pilgrims, nobles, sometimes chose inns out of necessity. And there, they joined the sitting sleepers. Because status didn't stop you from needing rest. And when the road called, you took what you could get. A chair, a bench, a quiet stairwell. Sleep came upright, wrapped in wool, clutching a pouch, leaning against a wall. Let's take a final moment. The fire is low, the room is hushed. One by one people nod off. Not deeply, not fully, but just enough. Enough to let the body slow down. The mind soften, the heartbeat steady. Sitting up, breathing softly, letting go, just a little. And maybe, that's all anyone needed. Now, take a long breath. Because next we'll step into the world of religious sleep. Monks in cloisters, nuns in silence, prayers murmured between waking and dreaming, and how the divine shaped how people slept, sitting in silence for centuries. Let's drift there, in the next part. We're nearly at the end of our journey now, and this part might be the quietest one yet. Tonight, we're stepping into sacred silence. Imagine a space where words are few, movements are gentle, and the very act of sleeping becomes a kind of prayer. Tonight, we enter the monasteries, a place where even sleep was disciplined, peaceful, yes, but controlled, guided by bells, by candles, by the slow rhythm of devotion. Let's begin. Picture this. Stone walls, echoing halls, a narrow corridor lit by torchlight. Here live the monks, and their lives follow a rhythm, one that's been the same for centuries. Their days begin before dawn. The first bell rings in the darkness. Matins, the night prayer. Sleep is not deep here. It is light, disciplined, and often sitting up. Yes, even here, in places of devotion, the upright posture in sleep was common. Let's sit with Brother Ewan. He is old now, thin, quiet. He sleeps in the cloister's dormitory, a long room lined with wooden planks called pallets. But his body does not lie flat. He leans against the wall, wrapped in a robe, a rosary in hand, his eyes closed, breathing calm. And beside him others do the same, monks in a line, barely shifting, sitting, breathing, drifting. Why? Why not just lie down? The answer is partly physical, but mostly spiritual. In many monastic orders, complete lying down was considered a luxury, too indulgent. Sleep was something to be observed, not enjoyed. To lie fully flat was to surrender too much, to risk dreaming too deeply. To sleep sitting upright was to remain watchful, still connected, to God, to the community, to the world beyond dreams. There's a practice called vigilantia. It means wakeful watching. Some monks, especially those seeking greater spiritual discipline, chose to sleep lightly. They'd nap, sitting, in brief intervals, then rise again to pray, and again, sometimes just 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, but never deeply, never selfishly. Their sleep was shared with their God. Picture the room at midnight. Candles flicker, the air smells of wax and stone. A monk shifts slightly, but doesn't move far. His hands are folded, his head tilts forward, but his spine stays upright. This isn't about comfort, it's about surrender, even in rest, even in stillness. Some monasteries even had sitting stalls for sleep. Imagine that, small wooden boxes, built into the walls, with tiny benches inside. The monks would sit within them, wrap their cloaks tight, rest their heads against the panel, and there they would sleep, like birds in small wooden nests, held upright by silence. And then, there were the nuns, living in convents, often following the same quiet rules. Their dormitories were simple, their robes served as bedding, and they too slept sitting up, because dignity mattered, modesty mattered, and so did control. Even dreams were considered dangerous, so sitting up helped them avoid them, or, at least, to resist them. Let's step outside the walls now, into the gardens of a monastic cloister. The moon is high, the stones are cool, and near a fountain, a monk sits in prayer, but he's been there a while, and slowly, his head begins to lower. Not in worship now, but in fatigue. He doesn't lie down, he simply lets his body shift, ever so gently, as sleep takes him, a sitting sleep, beneath the stars. Even nature allows it, even silence encourages it. It's hard to imagine now, in our soft beds, with pillows and plush blankets. But back then, sleep was purposeful. Every breath part of the faith. Every moment part of a cycle. And sleep was just one more offering. Given freely, humbly, sitting just enough to rest, but never enough to forget. There's an old legend of a monk who slept every night while sitting on a cold stone slab. For 20 years, he did it to remind himself that comfort is fleeting and devotion is eternal. Now whether it's true or not, we can't say, but the stone is still there, worn, smoothed, used, proof of some kind of rest. Upright, quiet, faithful. So now, let's picture the dormitory once more. Everyone is seated. Some drift just slightly. Others remain alert. And in the corner, a small bell hangs, waiting. Because in an hour, it will chime again. And they'll rise. Not groggily, not with protest, but with calm. They'll stretch their limbs, pick up their books, and begin prayer. As if sleep never happened at all. And maybe, for them, it didn't. Maybe sleep was not a pause in their day, but a continuation. A soft breathing meditation, done with the body still upright, still listening, still listening. So if you find yourself struggling to sleep tonight, maybe just sit, close your eyes, feel your breath, and know that for hundreds of years, others did just the same. They sat with candles nearby, with prayers on their lips, and silence in their hearts. They didn't dream, but they did rest. And now, let's take a gentle breath and slowly step into our final chapter, where we'll travel back to the heart of medieval bedrooms themselves. Private rooms, tiny wooden framed beds, curtains drawn, secrets kept, and how, even there, people chose to sit up in bed rather than lie down. Curious, let's finish the journey together. So here we are, at the last part of our journey tonight. You've followed every quiet corner, walked with peasants, sat beside nobles, listened to monks, and now, just one final place remains, the place most personal, most secret. Tonight, we enter the medieval bedroom, the one place where sleep, upright or not, had its own quiet rules, and a few surprises. So if you're still with me, still drifting there on the edge, let's go in. Imagine a small wooden house. The fire in the hearth is nearly out. The air is cool. The shutters closed. Inside is a bed. But it's not the bed you might expect. No thick mattress. No fluffy pillows. No soft light above. Just a wooden frame. A woven rope base. A woolen blanket maybe. And a figure sitting upright. Eyes closed. Hands resting in their lap. A quiet stillness in the room. People in the Middle Ages didn't always sleep the way we do now. In fact, the bed was less about comfort and more about utility. In many homes, it wasn't even a private space. Sometimes the whole family shared one room, or even one bed. And so, sitting up to sleep wasn't strange. It was practical. When space was limited, when bedding was scarce, and when you needed to stay alert to every sound in the night, sitting upright just made sense. But there was more to it than just space. There were beliefs, strong ones. People genuinely thought that lying flat, especially on the back, invited death. Why? Because that's how the dead were laid out. To lie flat too long was to tempt the end. And so they'd prop themselves up with pillows, wooden supports, even their own arms. They believed sleeping upright kept the body from becoming too still, too quiet, too much like a corpse. Even wealthy nobles with their ornate carved four-poster beds slept semi-upright, with high bolsters behind their backs, layers of feather-stuffed cushions, a sort of reclining position, but not all the way back, more like sitting in a comfortable chair. You could breathe better that way too, especially during those long, cold seasons, when everyone had a cough, or worse. That reminds me, there was another reason. Digestion. Yes, truly. It was believed that sleeping flat on your back made food rise up, 'cause illness, bad dreams, even death. But if you stayed upright for a while, after eating, even into sleep, you were safer. The body stayed aligned, the stomach settled, the soul stayed peaceful. Then, there's the half-sleep idea. Many medieval people didn't sleep straight through the night like we try to do today. They practiced what's now called segmented sleep. They'd go to bed, sleep a few hours, wake up, stay awake for a bit, pray, talk, think, sometimes even visit neighbors, then sleep again. So sleeping upright helped. You didn't fall into deep, unshakable sleep. You could wake easily, move quietly, then return to your bed, still warm from before. Let's step into one of those rooms now. It's a tiny peasant home. The roof is low, smoke curls in from the chimney, and in one dark corner, you see a wooden bed. Two people sit upon it. Not lie. Their backs against the wall, blankets wrapped around their shoulders. Their heads tilted forward, just slightly. Not asleep yet, but close. They're listening to the wind outside, to the cows shifting in the stable below, to the quiet rhythm of the house. And they're not afraid. This is how they've always rested, sitting, half between wake and sleep. Elsewhere, a child sleeps in a cradle, not lying down, but propped with hay and cloths. Why? Because it helps with breathing, with warmth, with safety, and it matches what their parents do. Sitting, always sitting, even in dreams. You know, it's strange now to think of sleeping as anything but horizontal. Flat beds, memory foam, sheets tucked tight. But for most of history, sleep was more flexible, more upright, more cautious, more human. People didn't chase comfort the way we do. They chased balance, safety, spirituality, routine, and sometimes, that meant sitting up. Not by accident, not for lack of better options, but because, that's just how sleep was meant to be. Somewhere tonight, in a quiet museum, there's an old medieval bed, short in length, high in headboard, narrow. It looks uncomfortable, but it wasn't meant for lying flat. It was built for sitting, for rest that came in parts, with pauses, breaths, and purpose. So tonight, if your own sleep feels strange, or you wake in the middle of the night, just sit, breathe, feel the stillness. You're not broken, you're not alone, you're just part of a long, long tradition. One that stretches back through centuries, of candles flickering, of soft woolen cloaks, of heads bowed, and eyes, slowly, drifting. And if you are still awake, then maybe, just maybe, you missed something lovely. You might want to go back to the 17th minute of the story, and listen again. Let it carry you this time. Or, you could play this video here on the side. It might help you sleep better. Good night. And may your dreams, if they come, be gentle,